Welcome to Catalyst Circle meeting of September 1st, 2022. Let's kick this off with a quick check-in, going around the room, starting with Quasar, and then we'll go to Steve. How are you all doing?
I'm doing pretty well, thank you. Excited to move forward with this election. And how about you, Steve? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well for no apparent reason.
Thanks, Felix, and then Chris.
That's a really cool statement. But yeah, I'm doing really fine as well.
Awesome. Chris, how are you?
As always, happy to be here. Looking forward to seeing the fruits of our labor today.
So, Reese, how are things going with you?
Yeah, I'm really good. Thanks, guys. Looking forward to getting this finalized.
All right. And JP.
Yeah, same as everyone, doing good. Sad I missed the last meeting. Good to see you all. I'm excited to see progress made as well, and hopefully we can get something down on paper that's a little more final.
Nice. And I'm doing pretty good too. I'm feeling a little bit burned out and a little bit tired today, but this is my only big thing for today. So I'm happy to be here with y'all, and also looking forward to seeing us come to decision on the election and moving forward with that. And yeah, so let's get going. Announcements. Any announcements? Anything quick that you want to share with each other or the community of things coming up, things important to note?
End of last week, was on Twitter, Danny mentioned I just posted a tweet. I said, hey, maybe one day we could get rid of whatnot. I don't remember the formulation anymore. To say, yeah, so we don't have this 3 or 4 months funding cycles, rather having something like each month. That's a really loose idea, but I think community had an amazing positive reaction to this, and a lot of conversations have been triggered there. I think so. Thanks a lot, Danny, for being amazing and putting great ideas out. Yep.
Quasar.
If anyone is interested, I believe there'll be a Twitter space on Saturday hosted by ADAO to talk about the circle and the elections. So there's an invitation for everybody if you can make it.
Awesome. Do you know what time it is in UTC?
2 p.m. Eastern, so maybe 7 p.m. UTC. 6. Okay.
Awesome. Chris, you have an announcement?
Yeah, I mean, it might not be something that we discussed today, but for a future circle, we are going to be kickstarting a working group for forthcoming audits and monitoring of projects. We've already got an expression of interest that's out there within the community with dozens of individuals that have expressed an interest to participate in discussions and possibly even some community-led action to dive into the deliverables of funded projects and help to start helping us to be able to demonstrate even more efficacy where possible.
When is that?
The workshop hasn't started. Hasn't been the date for it hasn't been fixed yet, but just worth calling out that we've started the process to invite people to submit emails and express their interest to participate.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks for the update, Chris. And also just for the record, voting starts September 5th. So that's exciting. And then it looks like on September 8th is the second DREP meeting. So there will be a workshop on the 8th as well in 2 different sessions. All right, any other announcements? If not,
I said a question.
yeah.
I'd just like to know before we really get into the meat of this, has anybody heard any objections to this idea that we talked about, to just have 5 circle roles?
That'll be part of the agenda, I'm sure. So as part of the reporting back, that was kind of our homework for last week, from last week. So I don't want to do that during the announcement section. We can do that as a proper agenda item if we need to add that. Any other announcements that we need to make?
Just for rest of Fund 9 schedule. So how it looks like is voting starts September 5th at 3 p.m. UTC. Voting ends September 19th. Then expecting voting results around September 27th. So end of September, and then the rewards of the Fund 9 funded proposals in middle October. I think this is what Danny confirmed so far. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, thanks for the update. All right, for the consent agenda, we have a brief conversation on the town hall slides, and then discussion around the nominee criteria and form. I know that Joey gave us a Google Doc with his thoughts, actually a Word doc on this as well. So that fits into that section pretty nicely. Is there anything else we want to add as a agenda item? Chris?
I just meant to, I forgot to mention that in the announcement section, I've got to finish in essentially an hour and 15 minutes. So I'll be off at 6 p.m. my time. It's 4:45 now.
Okay, thanks for the heads up. So anything else for the agenda? It looks like we're gonna do a little bit of town hall stuff and then follow up with the election conversation. All right, looks like a really focused meeting. That's amazing. And as output for this meeting, it sounded like we all want to drive towards having clarity around the election and kicking off the process so that it's all a go. So that's kind of the goal for today, right? So looking forward to this conversation. All right. So we are through check-in announcements, the agenda. Let's kick it off with the town hall slides. And I'm not sure whose topic this was. Maybe Quasar, do you want to kick us off with this?
Yes, thank you. You know, the town hall slides are due Tuesday by 1 p.m. Eastern time. And I don't want to take, I don't want to speak for the entire circle if I had things in there. Over the past week, there was, I made an edit to the town hall slides, which caused a little bit of discussion in the circle, and I apologize for that, for what came out of that, but I appreciate what Peter's doing. Ultimately, I'd like to make sure that we all either agree or not whether or not the circle is going to be presenting anything before town hall and have that prepared and delivered by the deadline that's been established.
Thanks, Quasar. I think the typical method of using the slides for town hall was for each circle seat to have a slide or two that they can update to report on to their community about what's been happening over the past week. And it looks like reps have not been using those over the last little while. So that's, I don't know if that's a conversation to have, whether there should be more communication or not. But the purpose was to prepare the slides, have them ready for you after town hall, and then you have an entire, almost a week until Tuesday to fill them in. So that's why, rather than rushing at the end, there's been a lot of time granted to think about it, work with your community, and report whatever you want to share. But I think it is a fairly underutilized tool, but maybe that's okay too, if there are other ways that people are communicating with their respective communities. But I don't know, any other thoughts or comments on the town hall slides?
Well, I think, you know, the lack of use, you know, by the reps is kind of an indication of why we needed to change the rep roles for this next election, you know, like and yeah, I hope that will resolve itself we can promote this next election effectively.
Anything else? Are you happy with that, Quasar? Kind of, I don't know if that resolved anything, but
I'm happy with it. Absolutely. I just want to, I'm not sure exactly how it's functioned in the previous circles on how that was updated and agreed upon and what to say or not to say. So I'm happy with what we discussed, and yeah, if that's what they were intended to do for the reps to use those slides to make a statement, that's great for me. That works. I still want to seem like I'm taking the lead on something to speak for the entire circle when the circle is in the state that it currently is in. So if possible, I'd like, maybe people to agree or disagree on what will be presented during town hall for this next few weeks while we have the time.
okay. Next on the agenda is the election. It looks like we're kicking off with nominee criteria and form, but maybe as a suggestion, we circle back to Steve's opening comment around what was the feedback from the community on the
I
decision.
missed something. Can you say it again?
Sorry. To circle back on our homework, to go back to our communities and see what they thought of the 5 seats without any criteria or definition. Yeah, so why don't we open that up? Or do you want to expand on that, Steve, and maybe kick it off?
Chris, that was like a Google or something.
Yeah, I have Alexa here and sometimes she gets triggered.
Well, I have Kelly here and sometimes she gets triggered, so it's weird. Things stay the same. I generally heard some positive feedback about this idea. In the sworn veterans meeting, there was what's the word? There was some insecurity expressed that this might be so vague that it allows the evil whales to come. And that's not what was said. That's just my interpretation of what was said. And I personally, I think we do have to wonder about the quote unquote whales, right? Because, we're still one NATO, one vote. And yet I'm not worried about the whales, because what is a whale? It's somebody who's put lots and lots and lots of money into Cardano, presumably because of this roadmap that we all invested into. That's why people invest in Cardano. So, the idea that the whales of Cardano can suddenly become bad actors is kind of a stretch for me, at least at this point, because basically all we want to do is see the ecosystem get built out. What we all want to see is the roadmap realized. And so I'm more curious if this kind of format actually brings out a whale that wants to engage, realistically engage, positively engage. I think that the possibilities of holding the boat on the drip drops finally allows us to hear from the larger community of ADA holders who might have had thoughts or hopes or ideas, to make this move along. And I'm pretty optimistic about it. you know, if only to say to the community as we promote this next election, look, this version 3 of Circle really had to deal with issues that had nothing to do with anything, right? There were personality problems and personal problems the whole 6 months, in the sense of the Circle becoming a cohesive unit that was doing something proactive. And, you know, we kind of worked our way through this period of time, and with this new election, you know, we could really start engaging, you know, like the Circle 5 election, you know, you've got 6 months. If you want to engage with this work, you've got 6 months to take some of these ideas that we first saw last week from the community and really talk about them and see what the research is on these various techniques for holding an election of a body of people like this. And I think there's the opportunity for enthusiasm to work productively for us, right? If we're enthusiastic about the opportunity that version 4 has, then I believe that we can create some interest among potential candidates for the election, you know, because I mean, just think of all of the things that are coming together just in the next 8 weeks, you know, 10 weeks. I mean, it's huge what's happening in the Cardano community right now. And there are many things for that Circle version 4 to engage with in service to the community. And I think that we should be able to articulate that, you know, on behalf of them, so that, you know, good nominees step forward, you know, out of the desire to contribute.
So it sounds like your conversations with the community were in support of the idea put forward last week.
Yeah. Other than that, just base level insecurity about what happens when there's, you know, nothing defined.
So thanks, Chris.
Would anybody mind just doing a quick round table on where this information was socialized? Because I seem to remember from last week that we were going to get it out to all the regional town halls, and I've heard that it was communicated on the Swarm meeting, but I wonder where beyond that it's gone.
Unfortunately, tomorrow was my first chance for me to go to the Africa town hall, which was my initial plan. And Thursday evening, my time is when the Latin America town hall happens, and I might be able to do it tonight. I wasn't able to do it last week. So, and then some of the other town halls, one thing that I actually about slides, Nori and JP and Peter, if he watches this, I don't like the town halls. When the town halls are listed in the slides, they say every other Thursday. Well, you know, which Thursday is this? You know, and I kind of like to see that, because it helps me plan if I actually want to, you know, engage with one of these town halls. And, you know, it's the same with, you know, the Africa town hall, you know, like I have to find somebody to tell me which week it is.
Short tip to this, Steve. All the town halls, they all have the calendar schedule. So there's a link in the slide as well, which brings you to the community where you have all the town halls. And in each of them is a big green join button. And when you click, you directly get to the Zoom page where you have all the next scheduled meetings listed.
It's pretty complicated, Felix. I hadn't figured that one out, but thank you.
Quasar.
I did not share this around to any town halls or to the general ADA community with direct intent. I dropped the working document into a few channels, received some feedback, and took that feedback, which was to relax and give everybody a little breathing room. So I took that and just backed off a little bit.
And presented the whole thing to the Cardano Foundation. the first have been very agreed to the 5 categories from Catalyst GPS, then didn't understood so much how it went off from the categories, as from their perspective they say it's broadly and flexible enough. And if we move to open categories, then we can just make a vote on everything. And in regard to that, in the Catalyst GPS, the entities are not mentioned, like, for example, IOG or Cardano Foundation. CF says definitely that they want to follow the subcircle structure and to initiate and support the Catalyst Foundation subcircle, which harmonize with other subcircles.
Well, there's a huge pushback, on GPS defined roles. I mean,
Yep.
and that's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. And I was a little bit reticent. I would have gone, like I said, I would have gone to the Africa Town Hall if it had been last Friday. And most of this week I've kind of just been wondering, is somebody, we all seem to be in agreement last Thursday. I was wondering if anybody was going to change their mind over the course of the week. And I was really looking for some affirmation that this is the way we want to go. And then, really get out there and push the idea, go to Cardano over coffee, go to Lido's nightly things that he does during the week. And, the ADAO thing on Saturday I think that's a really useful platform because they get a lot of people show up, a lot of people who really think about this stuff. So.
Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out I had a chance to catch up with Alex Mazza today from CF, and we're going to start having a regular meeting. On the point of GPS, I don't think he really understood the context on how the GPS proposal found its way into Catalyst Circle to start changing the makeup of it, really. So whilst I'm sure that they were broadly in agreement that it was probably a good idea, they probably didn't have the full breadth of context as to what led up to this sort of change. But on that point, and I'm sure as you probably know, Felix, that they're certainly keen to play more of an active role in Catalyst, and will hopefully have some bandwidth moving forward. And then just another point, I mean, it does feel like we do still have an opportunity to get some community input on this format. And I wonder whether anybody was or had planned or has any sort of Twitter Spaces or any other sorts of communication platform that they would like to go forward with to maybe open up the discussion in the public forum.
Well, like I said, I'm let's see how to say this. I've had a lot of experience in pushing ideas and then find out that the foundation for those ideas, gets taken away after that level of engagement to like do something has started. And I'm reticent. That's not a fun position to be in. And so this is why this working meeting was pretty important to me, just to gauge our level of seriousness about going in this direction. Just 5 open seats and top vote getters get it. And I stressed last week in the breakout room, and I stressed in a couple of meetings. I understand if you got problems with GPS. I don't have any problems with it. To me, it was unwieldy, because it was just so verbose and seemed possible to project anything you wanted it into that wall of words that they put together. Not that they were inconsequential words. I don't really mean to demean their work by calling it that, and yet it's dense. And it does leave a lot of room for subjective understanding of what they're saying. And that was the biggest problem with what they did. But the reason that what I really wanted to say was I feel like the reason, you know, to you know, Alex's question to you, Chris, why was this GPS thing, you know, being engaged with by the circle so much? You know, they were the only people that came here. They were the only people that had some ideas. They were the only people that had put together that much work. And so, you know, I felt like we were engaging with GPS in good faith because they put in that time. And that doesn't mean that we need to, should, or have an obligation to follow their work and install it. You know, I really wanted to take some of the ideas with those role names because I felt like they were good ideas, you know, those role definitions. But you know, it's pretty vehement, the pushback about even the role names, the role descriptions. And I don't know what to do with it. And that's why I said what I said last week, you know, let's not define it. Let's see what how the community defines itself. I mean, and that's a very Socratic method of us if we were to do it this way, you know.
You're right. I think that's why last week we decided to remove the categories and then go back and get feedback from the community. And I think there was general agreement at the meeting that that's kind of how we wanted to move forward. But I'd like, yeah, Quasar, do you have any feedback from your communities?
I do. I have three items. One, I'm not sure if Felix said that the Catalyst Foundation or the Cardano Foundation was looking at a subcircle or being more involved.
I don't know if there's any Catalyst Foundation, so
No, there's no Catalyst Foundation.
this is
Okay. Okay, so the Cardano Foundation's looking to do a subcircle and or just become more involved. Is that right?
exactly to start to engage more at Project Catalyst in general and figuring out ways how it's the most effective for them.
Wonderful. That's great news. The second item was in general feedback that would touch on the link that I provided here, which was shared by I believe the QA-DAO, which was a summary of their summary of our last meeting. So we've got that feedback as well on it. And then I have one more item of feedback that I'll have to pull from the community and add to the notes section. So I'll do that right now. Thank you.
Somebody read the QA-DAO feedback and can summarize that rather than going through their whole doc?
I didn't know. I wasn't aware of it. I didn't see where it got posted.
Well, ultimately, they provided a summary there. 5 seats, no predefined role at all. People stand for election and use their platform statement to explain why they care about Catalyst and what they want to do in the circle. Then we all vote, and the 5 highest votes voted individuals are elected, but this could still change if the community doesn't approve. So what do you think? The current reps will be taking comments from the community on Thursday. So have your say soon. So this was the summary that was attached to this link that was distributed through on multiple social medias, Discord, servers, channels, Telegram, etc. So that's the summary that they took from our meeting last time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's.
Thanks, Quasar. Chris.
Just as an aside, and let's not get too bogged down by this, but we agreed the action last time that at the start of each circle meeting we'd state the purpose of the circle meeting. We didn't do it within town hall either, so don't worry too much about it.
If we have a statement that is the purpose, we should add it to the agenda as the template. Yeah.
And that we'll take that as the action. The action today is create that statement.
Quasar, is QA-DAO in their feedback thing, are they expressing an opinion? Or are they just saying what happened?
I'm not I don't think I have the authority to make an answer there for you.
Well, They're just stating what happened in this though, right?
I can
Just see a transcript.
I can provide a link to where this was shared.
It's basically just a summary of the meeting.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. to me.
There's not really any opinion or anything in it. The only
Okay.
thing that is a summarizer's note about some people talking about possibly dissolving the circle and creating an interim working group, which we're not doing, right? So it's kind of irrelevant.
Thanks, Reese. Just out of curiosity, Reese, any feedback from the SPO side or communities that you've been working with?
Yeah. So there are so many SPOs that everyone has a very different opinion and different concerns. The whale thing came up. A lot of general discussion about whether there would be more of a kind of presence of multi-pool operators, which is just a whole SPO political thing that you don't really need to worry about, and I don't really think is relevant. And there were people that were nervous that SPOs would lose a position within the circle, which is obviously a risk that could happen, but I don't really think, again, that that's a problem. And if no SPOs go, no SPOs will get voted in. If SPOs want to be represented, they'll put themselves forward. So, but generally, people were positive about it. They were just a couple of concerns that came up, which I don't think are as big of a challenge or as big of a red flag with this new idea that some people made out to be. But that's probably because they just heard my summary of it, and then, you know, when you hear an abbreviated version of a story, your mind tends to go wild filling in the gaps, right? So I imagine that was just the case. But generally speaking, people were quite positive about it. Some people said that it seems like SPOs don't have a lot to do with Catalyst, which I kind of feel is accurate. You know, a lot of SPOs are more interested in what's going on with the network and what's going on in the ecosystem, and maybe putting proposals in rather than managing Catalyst in some way. So, you know, it's a very, very mixed response from the people that I spoke to. And but generally, most people were like, yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Just to summarize at this point, I guess it sounds like there was pretty good feedback from the community, or at least nobody was strongly opposed. So does that mean we're moving forward with, I guess, the summary that QA-DAO so graciously provided on the 5 seats, no predefined roles, stand for election, and have platform statements using drip drops to hold the vote? Are we all in agreement that we want to move forward that way?
I would like to hear from Chris what, you know, your team, the governance group at Input Output, but how they feel about this. Is this valid for them, or
I
what
think
kind
so.
of feedback did you get?
I think that so long as there's broad brush community buy-in, right? You know, I think the last thing that we want to do, whether it's IO, CF, or circle members, is to go forward with an election that does not have, you know, broad support from the community. So this is why, you know, it's super important that it's communicated far and wide. People have enough agency to be able to feed back, whether it's formally to the reps or, you know, via other sorts of methods. You'll see from Danny's work over, well, you know, or the team's work over the last few weeks for separate sort of items like auditing, or the what happens with a proposal, how decisions really are made, right? We're now making, you know, fairly significant steps and documentation to put people's concerns at bay. And, you know, Circle requires that same level of importance placed on making sure community are involved. And I think everybody does do that. And I think, you know, I'm just, so yeah, to summarize, the governance tribe, I'm broadly happy with the approach.
Well, I think you know, that's great. I mean, you know, to me, that's a relief. you know, and to me, it implies if everybody in this meeting right now, you know, and Joey, you know, is clearly, we've got his feelings, you know, from the document that he made this morning, you know, if there is consensus, right? If everybody agrees with this, then, you know, that gives us the foundation to go out with sincere enthusiasm and, you know, promote it, you know, and, you know, people will throw rocks at us, you know, when I kind of think we know what directions they're coming from, but at the same time, you know, you know, like, it's easy to be a critic. It's a lot harder to come up with something viable and come into these meetings and, you know, state your case. And I think that failing anybody doing that formally with the circle, then we have a lot of reason to go forward with confidence on this idea. And yeah, it's the next version's problem, right?
Yeah.
You can see how they deal with this stuff.
All right, for the record, let's make a decision. I'll call each person and then you can say yes or no, whether you're supportive of the 5 seats, no predefined roles, people stand for election using platform statements, we voting with drip drops, highest 5 voted are elected. All right, starting with Quasar, yay or nay?
Nay.
Okay, Steve.
Yes, but I want to hear what Quasar wants to do instead. I mean, you know, what's the alternative? What makes you say yes, Quasar? What would make you say yes? You know, I mean, like, I really want to know, you know, what would you rather do? And where's the support coming from to do it a different way?
I believe that there's still so much that's contingent upon agreeing to this that hasn't been ironed out. If I could ask, do we all feel like we did a great job of getting feedback from our general functional groups? I personally don't feel like I did.
And I think we did have a round of people sharing what they did do over the last week. And yeah, I don't know if the performance of that is necessarily a criteria for moving forward. We all agreed we're working under a timeline and we need to get the election going. Do we need more time for more feedback? Is it likely that there's going to be pushback and that we'll need to change things radically? The tone of the conversation here is most communities seem to be broadly supportive. There are some concerns and a few voices that are have some concerns around it, but overall, it seems like the tone seemed to be fairly positive that moving forward in this manner made a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I, you know, just to respond, Quasar, you know, like, you know, what's going to happen if we go into a few more Twitter spaces and we go into a few more breakout rooms and we go to a Saturday swarm session, you know, we do all those things. And, you know, like, my gauge of the community is we're going to hear 5 to 10 people say, well, why don't you do this? You know, and, you know, the reason is all of these other options, you know, might be good, but they should have been being worked on starting in May. You know, they should have been being thought about in May. There should have been a proactive pulling into circle meetings people who represent these other ways to do elections, you know, so that we could, as a body, talk about them. But it's September 1st. The circle didn't do that. The people haven't come forward on their own other than GPS, and you know, we are where we are. And so I'm kind of at the point of WTF. What do you really want to go out and do this canvassing of the community through the month of September and, hash out some, I mean, I don't want to do that, and I don't, yeah, that's the great point, JP. I mean, like at this point in the community's history, which is the very fucking beginning of the community's history, we're supposed to be experimenting. So let's just do this. I mean, like literally, I mean, there's less than a handful of assholes in Cardano. That's my experience. I like most everybody. And the assholes that I have met, they don't show up to these things. They don't show up and, rail against whatever people in Catalyst and Circle do. They don't. The assholes are busy being assholes somewhere else. Let's just engage with the good people in faith.
Right. If I may add one other item other than the feeling on the feedback that we received from the community, the idea of the compensation parameter change is at 5 seats. Like is agreeing to this contingent upon the other, and I easily change my no to a sustain or withhold.
It's worth a discussion. I don't feel that compensation is related to how we run an election. It does matter when we run it. It's one of the prerequisites that people will want to know whether they're going to run or not, what their compensation will be. But the method of voting, which is we're talking about right now, is going with 5 seats with no predefined roles. People stand for election with a platform statement. There's voting through drip drops, and the highest 5 get the seats. That's all we're discussing at this moment. We're not trying to conflate it with this other stuff. Those can be decided after if they don't directly impact the mechanism of election. I think that's what we're trying to get to so that we can actually move forward with some concrete plans. But that doesn't mean we don't have to, we need to work out all the rest of the stuff. But I don't want to tie it all up into one big Gordian knot because we'll never make a decision in that way, unless it is really relevant to the function of the election itself.
Steve, thank you for asking.
Can we get the other people's thoughts so we can finish this decision point?
Okay, so I'll come back to Quasar. Are you still a no, or would you, did the conversation help?
Do we need unanimous? We all have to agree yes on this?
We don't have to.
Okay, then I'm just going to sustain. I don't think I'm able to vote on this.
Okay, Quasar has abstained. Steve?
Yes, I think we should do this.
All right, Steve is a yes. Chris?
I don't know what the protocol is. Is IO? Do we have a share of the vote
At this
Yeah.
point, yes.
I mean, I have no issues going forward with the proposed approach.
Okay. Chris is a yes. Felix?
Yes, I think it's a good next step. Not the best one, but a good one. Good enough.
Okay, that's a yes. Reese?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. So we have 4 yeses, 1 abstain. So it looks like from the voting that we're agreed as a circle majority to move forward. So congratulations, you've made a decision.
This is a milestone! Timestamp.
Amazing.
1 hour 20.
I'm just gonna put an action item. So I've captured the vote. I'm gonna put an action item that we all agree, and that this will be the plan being moved forward by this group.
I mean, what I would say is that it would be great to maybe document like or capture Quasar's concern with this, right? Or abstaining perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I captured the conversation up till now, and then I re-put the vote in, and so I just put Quasar that do we need to be unanimous? I'll abstain, and then the rest are yeses.
Cheers, JP.
All right. Next is the nominee criteria form stuff. So we have some suggestions from Joey. He says his thoughts, candidate platform. Aside from a few wording adjustments, I like the questions that were on the CCv3 form. In addition, I support the candidate making a video to be presented at any meeting / time zone they wish. Candidate qualifications, I prefer to keep these requirements as flexible as possible to make the candidate aware of possibly exceptions, especially with the social media experience, because I show many. I've listed what I feel are the most important. And then he goes on. Nominees have to come up with their personal evaluation on each of these points. Substantial fit based on respective functional group profile defined above. Minimum 6 months of experience with Project Catalyst, knowledge about its purpose, key roles, and its activities. Able to devote 10 hours per week to the Catalyst Circle activities. Flexible for meeting times to coordinate with people around the globe. Note, Circle Global Team will meet to determine what date and time is best for all the participants. Meetings are usually 2 hours, 1 meeting bi-weekly for the Circle stated meeting, possible bi-weekly meeting for the working group. Commitment to adhere to the code of conduct. Ability to work with people, communicate professionally in both written and verbal modes of interaction, willingness to learn multiple communication apps in order to reach the Catalyst community. And he listed Slack, Discord, Telegram, Twitter, Zoom, etc., and willingness to learn working tools. And he lists Google Docs and Sheets, Circle, Priority Board. So that was Joey's thoughts on this. Other thoughts? Do we have a working form in progress for the nomination criteria?
I like the nomination criteria as they are. You know, I think they're fine. And I don't know what you would add or take away from it.
As they are, referring to Joey's or to the CCv3 nomination criteria?
I didn't compare the two, but my reading of Joey's seemed like what was in, the previous criteria that we had, other than these defined role things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Other thoughts?
I think it really captures well the main points, pretty straightforward. And it's kind of a merge of what we had of code of conduct and CC version 3 and our codes for defining criteria for the CC version 4 election. So
the only thing that I think that we have to be concerned about, and Reese was talking about this, and I don't even think it's that much of a concern, because I just don't think that there's consensus to act in a coordinated way. If 5 different SPOs stand up for election and they get all the votes, then we'll know the SPOs want to take over Catalyst governance. But they give no indication up until now that they want to do that. They have the ADA to do that, right? I just don't. I see that as so unlikely as it's not a concern. And so what I'm saying, and I'm saying that as a radical opposite thing. What I think is going to happen is we're going to see some people from the Latin American community stand for nomination. We're going to see some people from Africa. We're going to see some people from groups that we don't even, people just get fired up. They'll get enthusiastic and they'll think that they have something that they want to share with the broader community. And so they'll stand for election, and we'll see what happens in that case. But that's what would happen if we stuck with predefined roles. People would find their spot.
Thanks, Steve. So to summarize, you're saying that the nomination criteria as stated are good enough to do that? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I wouldn't necessarily think if all SPOs got elected by the community, that just signals that they want to take over Catalyst governance, because Circle isn't Catalyst governance. Let's be really clear. But it's baby steps, right?
Right.
We're all taking baby steps together on this journey.
And
Yeah.
there's clearly not consensus among SPOs, you know, they have consensus about the protocol, but not much else, right? There's a huge diversity of groups within the SPOs.
Let it be known for the record that I'm really, really pleased SPOs can find consensus for the protocol.
Me too.
Otherwise we're all fucked.
Right.
Yes, most of us are now upgraded to 1.35.3, so we're good to go. Reese.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that was my exact point. I don't think it's that big of an issue, even if any bad actors potentially got in, and bad actors is a very strong term, obviously. What are they going to do? Work hard for Catalyst? It's
Yeah,
not really
right.
going to be no damage done, I don't think. So it's kind of a non-starter, that issue.
Thanks, Reese. Quasar, in chat, you said you wanted to add one thing for the 5 roles.
Yeah, thank you for letting me bring this back up. I believe that I believe that there's more than 5 roles needed, or at least more than 5 seats. I feel like this was highlighted in the V3 election. It's been something that has been talked about in regards to subcircles and things of that nature. So I believe I would rather see 7 seats personally. Like, there's no way one person can represent general ADA holder. There's no way one person can represent SPO. There's just not enough in my mind, and that's something that we've all been part of that discussion, or seen it evolve, even going back to the CCv2 in November.
Well, the libertarians among us would say that's too much bureaucracy. That's exactly what bureaucrats want to do, is they want to grow the bureaucracy. Right? I mean, that's the pushback.
Absolutely, I agree. And maybe the new 5 roles, or the people that are in those seats can do a much better job at facilitating the communications and whatnot. So I agree with you, Steve. That's what they'll say.
I think it's a valid conversation though, too, because I have some questions with 5 seats. Does that, we're talking about the 5 elective seats, but are we still assuming there's 2 appointed seats, one from IOG and one from Cardano Foundation? Just for clarity, is that what the assumption is? Chris and Felix?
Like mentioned before, CF definitely wants to stay engaged and want to even get more engaged. So they definitely would love to.
Yeah, same.
So we're
I do.
I mean,
Go ahead,
how
Mark.
this exactly looks like before when I mentioned this CF subcircle, there's nothing defined on this yet. It's just a loose idea where the chat was around, okay, in this holocratic system, how could CF engagement look like? But there's not yet really a strong plan or whatnot, how this could actually admins would look like. Just to some clarification on this.
So we are still talking about a circle of 7, like it was. We're just making the 5 elected seats open to any nomination platform that you want to come forward with. Quasar.
That was not what I was referring to as the 7 seats. I was not including IOG or CF. That would actually put it to 9. And I'm not advocating for more bureaucracy. I'm just saying that the community is larger and more diverse. That's simply what I'm trying to express.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with you, Quasar. I mean, it's a big planet and we got people in over 100 countries. So yeah, this is not the end result.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, right now it doesn't really do anything anyway. So, you know, let's just be nice and encourage people to come and do nothing together.
Maybe this would be a beautiful thing to add, for example, on, let's say, guiding actions for Catalyst Circle version 4. Already redefine yourself, redefine the amount of represented seats, redefine the roles or the categories, do some research, engage the community in such conversations. Was stuff where we see, oh, okay, this is actually pretty important, but kind of out of scope for our time limit now. To say, oh, okay, maybe this is something we should introduce to the next circle as well, and give them already some stuff where we can show, hey, look, these are pretty important points. They're not solved yet. Not yet, nor in previous circles. So
Yeah, and I'm, you know, it's a big hope for me that we get some regional representation, something beyond Europeans and North Americans, right? And get their thoughts about these processes. And I don't mean to say that Circle is useless when I said that a minute ago. I meant we have nothing to do except form the next election and a code of conduct, which, we haven't solidified yet, as far as I know. And there needs to be next steps, like how should the community experiment, and the community should speak to the circle. And I think the community got burned out on version 3 pretty early on in its process. And I it's regrettable, but that's just the way it happened.
Any other questions, comments on that? Does anybody want to make a proposal that we increase from 5 seats to more? Okay. So we'll keep moving forward. Nomination criteria form, to circle back to that. It sounded like Steve, Felix, others were pretty okay with how it's been worded in Joey's doc, which was taken from the CCv3 nomination criteria. I think the only big difference that I saw was the mention of a code of conduct. Does anybody want to solidify that criteria for the election process purposes, or shall we let Joey run with his doc and use that as kind of the basis?
The last version of the code of conduct that Chris gave us, was full of repetition, and I've been meaning all week to edit that down so that nothing is said more than once, but like it's a lot of common sense stuff in there. I think we just need to edit it and then present it to the group to say this is the code of conduct.
So are we still talking about the nominee criteria, or did we jump to the code of conduct?
When we're talking about integrating that, if we refer to it, we need to really have it nailed down what it actually is my point.
Yeah, so code of conduct is next on the agenda. Are people okay with the nomination criteria? Maybe since he's not here, we can assign Joey an action item to solidify that for election use.
Since he's not here, does somebody here want to rally and pair with him so we're not just dumping it on him after?
I'm happy to get in touch and figure that out.
Thanks.
I don't think a lot of work needs to be done for it, to be honest.
Yeah, he's done a lot of the write-up and
yeah, so I'm happy to get that over the line.
awesome. Code of conduct. Chris, do you want to share a link and kind of kick off that conversation?
Sure. Okay, sharing link. Okay, do you want to drive slide screen share?
Sure. Let me relinquish that.
Actually, that's all right. Why don't you do it? Because to be honest with you, I'm gonna when I drop off.
Okay. It's coming up. My computer's a bit slow.
Okay.
All right.
So I guess to kind of kick this off, what I've made this into a V2 version. It's not really functionally different from the V1 version, just has accepted or consolidated comments from IOG legal, and really the remaining parts around sort of sections 5 through 9 were the main missing, or the main parts that are obviously lacking content. And so these do require some discussion. I know the conflicts of interest has been a point of matter, certainly on the back of people's minds for some weeks, and what we need to do there, or certainly we need to bottom it out to be comfortable, and certainly discuss what these processes really look like. And then similarly, this, discussing of processes with regards to reporting violations, dispute resolution, and enforcement. This all requires, I think, either the circle reps to drive forward, or by consulting their constituent community members, or we need to come up with a plan on what we're going to do to bottom out these additional areas, or these final sections. Now, all of the acceptable behavior and unacceptable behavior statements are statements that were, I believe, polled, or they were driven using poll.is. It was certainly, it was just a bit before I joined Circle, so I believe that these items were collected by Harris. But yeah, where I got to with this was just trying to put some definitions and some structure to the actual sections of the document, and then where I could start some of the aspects of the elements that we haven't yet made inroads into, and then leave it for open discussion as to what to do next. Now, things like the proposed functional roles was added. For example, I hadn't put that in there myself. I think that was suggested by Tommy at the time. And yeah, so that's I think where we are so far.
So do we want to, like, I could take this back to my subcircle, I've already made a copy of this document. Like everybody get their editing chance, and from each rep, then there's a version we can see how it consolidates. I mean, I was really curious, if you had input outputs legal team. I mean, this long list of stuff that just kind of goes on and on and on, and in a circular way about acceptable or unacceptable behavior. I mean, it just seems so untidy for something that's been reviewed by legal counsel. And it's not that they're embracing it, is it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you, for example, let's be like, let's give a comparison. So I've just shared for the audience's benefit the Mozilla Foundation's community participation guidelines, and yeah, I mean they're not like bullet pointed entirely in the same sort of way, and I'm not sure this is exactly the best comparison to draw from, or there's probably a number of different types of codes of conduct that we could draw some influence and some reference from. But I think what we're looking at is a set of statements within the code of conduct that we have. If we disagree with them, or we think that they should be somewhat segmented and sectioned so that maybe it's a bit more readable, sure. I mean, let's have that discussion. But again, these, from what I understand, all of those statements were polled as to what people thought were valid and important for this code of conduct. From a longer list, from what I understand.
Well, stuff like game the system. I mean, there could be so many subjective, perspective, definitive ways to look at what that actually means. That's like that's what I was thinking about lawyers when I'm reading these things, like harass people. I mean, like I just want to answer to a question, somebody who doesn't want to answer the question that's a valid question could say, hey, he's harassing me, hell breaks loose.
Well, yeah, but then there's meant to be a process for where you would then raise a violation and then it will be discussed, or there's a process to be able to validate or invalidate those claims, right? I mean, here we go. So, and just for everybody else's benefit, that's the data sheet, I believe, that it's publicly viewable. Was where all these points initially came from, or not initially. They were agreed with or otherwise.
Right.
So where we are currently is that maybe all those bullet point list is a bit unreadable. Maybe we could look to segment and section it a little bit better. Maybe it's a task for CCv4, or we could maybe make some inroads on it in the time that we've got left together.
That's not a bad argument to say, because there was no talk about needing a code of conduct until version 3. So maybe version 3 is not the group to do the code of conduct.
I wouldn't say it's because of Circle 3, though, Steve. Far from it. It's just
no. I'm just saying this. That's when it happened. I don't. It's not because of anything. It's just this is just the way things have played out.
Hey, sorry, your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to recommend that this circle does take an honest attempt at the conflicts of interest part, especially the dispute resolution. I believe we'll all benefit from engaging in that process and hopefully making the path a little bit more clear for CCv4 if they're to finalize this. But a code of conduct, and most importantly, a way to report any type of information, any action to the right parties. And it is huge. That's one thing that we've been talking about in the general broad community of who do you go to report something? How do you report it? This is pre-CCv3. This is CCv1. This is Catalyst Fund 1 and 0. This is common things that would have been beneficial to all of us. So I'd like to suggest that we do take a good shot at least the conflicts of interest, number 6, 7, 8 enforcement. I don't know, but there's a lot there, but it's serious stuff and it's for the community.
Thanks, Quasar. Chris.
Yeah, I'd like to put it somewhere. I would like to put somewhere some useful reference examples that I've had passed to me as well, so that we can maybe make some inroads in divide and conquer on the COI and etc. etc. Happy to put it into the bottom of this document if everybody's happy for me to do so.
Yeah, I think that might be a good place just to have it all there and people could reference it. Yeah, I think there are really good examples through different open source and other communities that have thought through these processes. So I think leveraging their wisdom might be a really good idea. So we obviously need a code of conduct, and we're including it as part of the nomination criteria for nominees to agree to and abide by these. How do we want to complete this? Do we want to give ourselves a deadline? Who wants to work on it? It looks like there's a lot of collaborative edits and comments and stuff happening by different circle and ex-circle members. Are we continuing that process? Does somebody really want to drive and help coordinate stuff?
I mean, I'm certainly happy to sort of own some of this if you like, but obviously it should be across the circle activity.
You know, I kind of want to just do an edit, you know, and then I'll share it, you know, on Slack, you know, because I feel like, you know, my feelings after reading it were, yeah, I need a magic marker, and then I want to see how short it is, you know, and how whether or not it hits the main points. You know, the only thing where I really draw a blank on it is enforcement, or whatever that number 6 or 7 thing was. I mean, you know, the circle is the enforcer of its own code of conduct. You know, I don't know whether you have to say, you know, if you're going to eject a member because of violating the code of conduct, because, you know, the question to me is, does that need a unanimous vote? If 2 people vote against it, is that valid reason for keeping somebody in the circle? You know, it's like, I don't know, you know, it depends on the situation, right?
My suggestion would be that before anybody takes a stab at making any edits, that we all read through those links that I've just provided at the bottom. In particular, I mean, or not in particular, I think all of them are important, but the one that I've just pulled up is this code of conduct enforcement consequence ladder that's in Mozilla's GitHub, and it just gives a bunch of steps, and actually it says it's building on this from the Drupal community, which was remixed from the Django conflict management manual. Now, both Drupal and Django, I'm sure some of you will know, are are communities of practice in developer ecosystems and actual technologies as well, importantly. And so yeah, so I think there's some really cool things that we can learn from these. And actually, I might try and I won't try. Do or do not, there is no try, as Yoda once said. We will put in there the Linux Foundation's approach on this as well, just to sort of see if they have anything like from other open source communities that we can draw some influence from.
Well, if in these different groups, Linux is obviously older as far as I can tell than the other groups, but I mean, if they've actually had to enforce their code of conduct and actually take enforcement action, I'd like to see the history of how that went down for them. So I mean, I don't know. I assume that they would open source their history, right?
Maybe. I mean, I wonder, Felix, is there an action on you to maybe ask CF if they would be happy to ask Dirk if there's any examples that they could provide? I mean, it's worth an ask, isn't it?
Definitely.
All right.
Definitely add this to my action items.
Folks, I'm conscious because I'm going to drop off in 10 minutes and I don't want to leave you hanging on another matter that I'm sure everybody would like to have a little bit of discussion about. And so I wonder whether we could pause the agenda and if anybody wants to discuss the potential options or sort of types of schema for compensation, we could have a look at that.
Okay. Just to wrap this up then, Chris, it sounds like you're willing to lead the code of conduct, and then other circle members are invited to collaborate and suggest or do edits to the primary doc or contribute additional stuff. And then there's homework to read the existing community examples from different tech communities that Chris has provided. Okay. And just quickly for timeline, we need this for election. Is that an agreed kind of statement? So there's probably a 1 or 2 week window to get this done.
Yeah, I mean, my instincts is that even if we we pull it together in 2 weeks, it's still going to take a little bit of time to make sure that everybody's comfortable with, both from a legal and a community perspective.
Yeah. Okay.
So as we work on this code of conduct, right? The people in the community who are interested, they'll be able to access it and make their own comments. I mean, like I'm not going to do anything on this public document. I'm not going to make side comments on the right here the way it is. I'm just going to do a version, and I'll share it with y'all. And the questions, about I'm just saying the questions about enforcement and stuff, I think that's ongoing research for us, and it can be a living document like anything else, right? Once we establish it. But yeah, I'd really like to hear what you're thinking about compensation.
Okay, just on the point of this, just to close off, obviously just to underline that all of the acceptable and non-acceptable behaviour is what has already gone through a community consultation process. So if you do take stuff out, Steve, and you've got autonomy and agency to do so, yeah, just be mindful, obviously, that that this has gone through some sort of round of getting input.
Sure. Right.
All right. Over to you, Chris.
Okay. So yeah, and I apologize that I haven't got any slides on this, and I'm happy to get something together retrospectively, try and get something together that actually documents this. So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about an idea where everybody sort of put forward or at least gave their approval for a compensation model, which was essentially requesting that I look at $1,000 per seat for 6 months. Now, what I wasn't really clear on was whether it was per seat for just the 5 elected seats, or whether it's per seat including a facilitator and a secretary. So, I think that's one thing that we need to sort of couch and just call out, is that if it's $1,000 per seat for everybody in the subcircle, i.e. 3 subcircle members, what that becomes is $3,000 per month times 6 months, times 5. Oh, sorry, $3,000 per subcircle per month for 6 months. And at that point, we're eking close to $100,000 being spent on the circle. My instincts are that without really clear defined scope of work or service level agreements in place, we may well get quite a lot of pushback from community. I did run this idea by Alex today as well, in CF, and also have some discussions internally within IO as to what do we feel is likely to be the outcome of if we just allocate nearly $100,000 to the circle. And I think the broad view is that there's no doubt that there's work that's being done that is currently not compensated, and that should be addressed. But finding the right balance is really, really important. So I think that there are some options to discuss, and this is what I'm sort of proposing. And maybe there's a number of more than one model that we can consider. So first of all, there's the $1,000 per month per seat per subcircle, which again amounts to about $90,000 over the 6 months.
Wait, that's $30,000.
No,
We're just
so
paying for the 5 of it.
just for the 5 people. So what about then the facilitator and the secretary?
Wow. Okay, I thought you were going without that.
Oh, well, let's talk about what the options could be, right? If we're all in agreement of looking at options. So,
well, what I know you want to say something, you know, and I really get that. The argument you're making, that it's kind of vague to commit 3,000 per seat. But I think maybe the compromise would be like, you know, what QA-DAO does. You know, like I think they should get paid something. You know, what Nori and JP or Peter do, they should get paid something. And so I think a good compromise is to back off and just pay the 30,000 to the elected reps for 6 months, and then, you know, create a budget to pay, you know, the circle facilitator and secretary, right? You know, JP and Nori in this instance, and QA-DAO for documentation. And I think that would come to a smaller number than that other idea.
yeah, so this is the thing. Let's look at this in the main, right? I think it's absolutely valid to take a real holistic view of this. So, you know, there's the first option, as Felix just put in the chat. Only reps option equals 30,000. All seats essentially makes that 90K, right? So we're tripling that number. I think, you know, there's also maybe an option to consider, which is more like a kind of a nominal amount, which is smaller in size, would hopefully not you know, put anybody or too many people's noses out of joint, which could be, say, you know, $500 each for each seat, including scribes and facilitators. That means that number is automatically halved. And then an allocation for actual tools, which is, you know, the Google Workspace, the Slack, the domain hosting and whatnot. And, you know, this is with a view that actually what we're trying to establish is integrity and legitimacy of the circle, and gaining community buy-in that there's value being created and being delivered, right? So demonstrable value for what's being paid for. So that's an idea, is to maybe look at how we maybe take a haircut on all of those numbers, so it's perceivably less than nearly $100,000 for 6 months, without, you know, SLAs, clear scope of work, timesheets, all these things that are going to add, you know, sort of administrative burdens, and, you know, contractual burdens perhaps on people that are ultimately doing this for passion mostly, right?
No.
Another option is
about this point of passion. No, disagree, very strong disagree. The people we are targeting here for are not newcomers, which become the first-time proposer, first-time PA. The people we try to get for the circle are folks who are already very long around and know really well about this stuff. One thing is they have all their own projects, and they mostly went from very well-paid day jobs into Catalyst. And like Nori mentioned, the budget you at say, okay, 90,000 for half a year for a whole crew. This is what sometimes they earn as a single individual. And I think in this case, it's a little bit to say, we are not able to pay for something what is done. We have to go to risk to pay people for what we need actually. But when not coming with serious rewards, we will not attract the people we actually need, because they will just say, okay, yeah, once again, one of your volunteer jobs, really nice, really beautiful, but I have limited hours and I can't volunteer.
Yeah, but you know, the counter argument to that is, does the broader community understand the value that Catalyst Circle provide? Can they hand on heart say, yes, we are seeing the demonstrable value? And that's not to denigrate anybody's work. It's, you know, okay, nearly 100 or nearly 200K gets allocated to Catalyst Circle just to pay the people, or just to compensate the people over a year. Does the community understand that value? Right? And that's what I think there's potentially the risk of the most contention around. Right? So let me finish what the other two models are. give me 2 seconds. So the third model is, which I don't think anybody wants, is that no one gets paid, right? No one wants that. So, you know, but let it just be for the record that that's a potential approach. Fourth, in a couple of weeks' time, in, you know, less than a month, we are going to have a good understanding as to whether something like Catalyst contributors is going to be, you know, voted upon and enacted, if it's voted upon, for Fund 10. At that stage, there's community consent for the notion of Catalyst contributors, and therefore, you know, whilst that is going to go through the Fund 10 proposal process, I think that's a very, very strong signal that the community thinks that those core contributors should receive receive something for their efforts.
I'm sorry, are you saying that's a challenge in Fund 10, or what are you saying about Catalyst contributors? What is that?
It's a challenge setting proposal. So this
In
is a
Fund
proposal
9.
that's been put forward by
Okay.
George Lovegrove, which is ultimately
Okay.
ring-fenced budget for, you know, core and value contributor functions, which I would imagine kind of starts with Catalyst Circle, and, you know, could span to things like auditing and monitoring, or all the tools and you know, administrative functions that are being delivered within Catalyst. And actually, that ring-fenced budget would be there to essentially take advantage of.
Yeah. Well, you know, you asked the question, you know, does the community feel that the circle is demonstrating value? And no, you know, like our proof of work has not proved itself. I don't think. You know, I don't get that from anybody in the community. So, you know, like, so that leads me to believe that there's more proof of this proof of work to be done. And given that, then yeah, we can, you know, we could pause it and see how this challenge proposal comes out, and then you have to wait another 4 months and see what happens with proposals made in it, right?
Maybe here's the point. Maybe, and excuse me for jumping in, but I just want to make this point. Maybe if contributors gets voted in, there's a reason to look to expedite the process.
Good point. Thanks, Reese. You have your hand up, and then Quasar.
Yeah, I agree with Felix. I've just, this is 6 or 7 months on the circle, and my understanding going into it is that I was going to be paid more than what I was for the first fund. And having known what I know now, I probably wouldn't have put myself forward, because I've got 3 proposals that I'm working on every day. I've got a full-time job. I work as an SPO as well, and I'm involved in a bunch of other stuff. Like, I don't have time to do this a lot of the time, and I intentionally make time to do this stuff, and it's difficult to do that. And I think that's the case with a lot of the higher tier kind of talent that you'd be looking to bring into this process. Everyone deserves to be paid for their time. And going by your last point, Chris, kind of going on a hope and a prayer that we might one day get some money, or not us, but, you know, Catalyst Circle might one day get some money, is not a way to conduct the circle. It's not an effective way to get anyone to put any time into it. I definitely wouldn't put myself forward if it was like, oh, maybe in the next fund, we might have a challenge, which the fund after we might potentially get funded, but it's really up to Catalyst. Going by all of the delays that we've had, almost every fund, there's a delay. Yeah, it's not a way to fund something, an entity, for people to actually do serious work. And I agree with Steve, you know, maybe from the outside, it doesn't look like we've done a lot of stuff, but I think actually our group has done a hell of a lot more than previous circles. And that's nothing against those guys. I know a lot of them personally. They're all lovely and they all work hard and they all believe in Catalyst. But without funding, you can't expect people to work. Without people being paid, you can't expect people to do anything. I charge a lot of money per hour. I actually do. And that's because I intentionally work my ass off for the things that I work for. And like, there is no way that anyone should be working on maybe one day you'll get funded, but until then, you're expected to put 10 hours a week into this thing. Because like, how do you expect people to take that seriously? In order for the circle to be taken seriously, you need people who are getting paid to be able to do their role seriously. And without that, you're asking for a volunteer role. It's and going by funding proposals, you're asking for charity. Neither of those things are a way to get any serious work done. And I think £1,000 per person per month is nothing. It's literally nothing. Like, that's no money. I wouldn't work for that much. Realistically, I wouldn't, because that doesn't cover even a quarter of my bills every month. Like, how can I dedicate time to that when I could be earning serious money doing actual work? It's a nice idea, but I don't think it's an effective way to run the circle. And that's my thoughts on it.
Also, to this vision, I think one thing why Catalyst Circle also still works is because we have the CC admin team, and Swarm spends $10,000 per month into supporting a bunch of people there. These are funds we have not foreseen. This is something what we have to put, because we say, hey, no, it's really important what is going on there. It's really important to support the engagement there. And at least we can show some appreciation to the people. But this is money we never calculated in our proposals. And we are able to spend already $10,000 per month. And Swarm is a ridiculously small thing. We have nothing in fund. So where's the problem? A little bit in there. Because for us, it's hard.
Quasar, you were in line. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Chris, the idea of the Catalyst contributors is a good one. Down the road, I think we do need a stopgap in place for CCv4. If it be somewhere of the 1,000 per role with 2 additional people, I think the circle can do something with that. I think it opens up, the 5 roles, and those 2 supporting of each role opens that conversation for us to be a little more nimble. But I think there's going to have to be something in place for CCv4 without, the contingency of contributors being funded. So I think there's some middle ground that we can find.
Chris, I know you've got something really good, but I just want to throw in, as far as community perception, as long as it's the way it's been, nobody's going to take it that serious. And then they're justified, right? By the slow pace of decision making and everything. But if they're paid, the community will take that serious, and it will engage them. You're getting community funds. What are you doing? Or you're getting paid. I want you to listen to me. And I think it becomes a positive feedback loop if the circle was to start getting paid serious, like it's fixed.
Okay. So listen, I'm hearing everything that everybody's saying. It's all okay to say I don't think the community has any issue with it, but data really is going to be what sort of sells it to everybody. I think community consent is a really, really important factor here. and this is why, as I said, the stopgap could be expediting, Circle being funded if the Catalyst contributors gets voted in, and this is going to be in a matter of a couple of weeks, right? We will know the outcome of that. The other point to sort of mention is that, like, at the point where people are being paid, there needs to be a really clear set of deliverables that the community can hang their hat on, and that the Circle reps can be essentially accountable for. And we all I'm saying is that we've had some, not issues, but like we haven't really pinned down what those role functions, and I don't want to go back into this conversation about role types, but what are the deliverables and the SLA that everybody would be having to commit to. We would need to get that in place for I think for everybody to feel comfortable, even just from the community's perspective, that they know what their Circle reps are being paid for.
Quasar.
Forgive me, my son's calling. I'll be.
Okay.
Guys, I'm sadly gonna have to drop off here. I'm gonna be here for another 3 minutes. Let's have some next steps. I've just got to be somewhere in 15 minutes, unfortunately.
Okay, it sounds like we're nowhere.
Hey, Nori, I did remember.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Chris, with the funding cycles, the changes in the Catalyst, the research that I've done shows that it's a good 9 months before anything actually takes takes. We can see what difference it's made, or if it has. So the Catalyst contributors thing, yes, it might be voted in for Fund 10, but that proposals won't be, funded until 11. So, that's a good 9-month window that we should be considering.
We've just said about, raising the point of expediting the process. If Catalyst contributors as a challenge gets voted in, that's a signal. That's a really clear signal from the community that the community believes that people contributing at various different sort of functional roles or parts of Catalyst should be receiving some resources to deliver that work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, which also leads to the full funding category that was put in with that proposal.
They're different proposals.
They are different proposals, but one includes everything. The other one is all itemized.
I'm talking just specifically about the Catalyst contributors one.
Okay.
All right. Chris's time is limited. We don't have next steps yet. Do we need to figure out what those are? It sounds like we want to be clear on what compensation will be when people nominate themselves, so we get the best possible candidates, or the most, they know what they're signing up for and not being surprised.
Well, I mean, we're also talking about giving them basically a task list, right? What are they getting paid for? Besides talking about their next election.
The nomination criteria has a lot of that in there already. 10 hours per week, using the board, connecting with your community. So I wouldn't say it's not clear. There is a whole lot of detail in there. And if that's not enough, maybe we need to start there to clarify things. But Reese, your hand is.
Yeah, I think if that isn't enough, then the Catalyst Circle should be getting paid more, because certainly they're expected to do a lot more work. And what I think really needs to be done is there to be, for the sake of payment, like fair compensation for works, there just needs to be a more strict adherence to reporting, which obviously there hasn't for this group because we've all been working for free. But with payment comes a reason to be enforcing that. I can't imagine, back to what you were saying before, Chris, speeding up any kind of funding within any given category is going to be a go. Like, I just can't see that happening, because that completely deviates from the whole Catalyst process, and that's going to have more kickback than giving the Catalyst a little bit of pocket money. But like, I don't think, even if that challenge went through, because it's not guaranteed, even if it did go through, I can't imagine that they're going to agree, like anyone's going to agree that a portion of that should be automatically given to Catalyst Circle either. And so I don't really see it working realistically. I don't think it's a bad idea. I just don't think it can be implemented in a way that actually respects the people who are going to be replacing us, because that needs to be in place. You know, they need to be respected for the role as the circle, you know. And I don't mean by the community, but I mean in terms of fair or reasonable compensation for the expected workload.
I made the comment in there that 10 hours is, you know, questionable, the fair pay. If we looked at circle with a slight redefining of sub-circles or other circle participants based on what their actual time availability was, what they could commit and on what days, I think we can get close to a structure that's audible, definable, and reachable. But yeah, it's a lot of work sorting through some of the stuff. So,
Chris?
I mean, the only thing I wanted to say is that I think if there was some, you know, clear deliverables, right, that was like, as Reese was suggesting in terms of reporting, that, you know, and I know we have, you know, QA-DAO that captures all this, and JP and Noreen, you guys do a fantastic job of capturing what's being said in the discussions. But if there is some clear reporting lines and sort of process around that, then
so
that becomes a bit clearer as to what's being paid, you know, how people are able to audit it.
Okay, so to answer that point, Chris, I think the one thing that we could do that would satisfy what you're saying is to put in the task list for the next circle that they have to work on this holacratic idea. You know, they have to build community, right? They have to go out and they have to say to people around the world and within Catalyst, hey, you are a community, you are a group, and you need to form a circle of your own to think about governance and talk to the circle people, right? That we're trying to build a holacratic model, and that means lots of circles, not just 7 white guys in a Zoom call, right? You know, we need to see that the circle is building that larger community out, you know, through circle building. You know, because
Well, I mean, the other way to have a look at it is maybe, and so sort of just jump in, because I'm literally going to drop off in 1 minute.
Sure.
You know, being really clear on like what, yeah, just saying I'll go out and build community, but maybe it could be like they have to commit to doing a Twitter space a week or something, right? Like some commitments where, you know, it's public, it's auditable, you know, there's going to be some very clear outcomes from those discussions. I'm just trying to think of ways, you know, that we can.
No, I see it that way. You know, I see it that way, and that's how it's, you know, the D-reps have to do that. You know, the D-rep's going to be a failed experiment if they're not out there talking to the community about the proposals.
Yeah.
If they're not out there talking about the things that they want to vote for. You know, and so that whole, you know, every little finger in the community has to be doing this.
Not to reinvent systems and stuff, but we already have a mechanism for proposers funded to do this and report and get paid. Maybe we use the exact same mechanism for circle people to report, and if they do their report and share it with the community, then they get paid, and not reinvent mechanisms. That might be it's not perfect, but it might be
Guys, I'll tell you what,
that's me. We don't have that.
I feel like
Chris,
it's going
can
to be
we agree on
beneficial
the
if I drop
90K?
off and you guys talk. And you guys figure out yourselves. And then
Could we agree on the 90K at all?
I don't think we've agreed on it. I think there's still some nuance to that.
Okay.
Right? You know, what's going to be the way to sort of combat the community being unconvinced that they know what that reps are being paid for. That's not to denigrate anybody's hard work, but you know, we're getting it every single week now around like Catalyst needs to be auditable, every project outcome needs to be transparent, evidence needs to be better than what it is, and we're all taking steps to make these make these evolutions and advances. So, you know, should Circle be any different? And, you know, I know that we're capturing and we're recording these, you know, these meetings, but then it's all the other work in between, and that's probably what we need to pin down. And then, you know, it's pretty clear, right? This is what you're going to get. This is what's expected of the role and what the outcomes are going to be. And then, you know, I'm pretty confident we've still manned those issues. On that, I'm going to drop off. I really appreciate you letting me go for the time being. Listen, we can continue talking about this async, and if you want to have a meeting about this before next week, we can get together and like continue the chat discussion. I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah, sorry to keep you here, Chris. We appreciate it.
No, not at all. I'm sorry that I've got to drop off, and you know, it's
Thank you, Chris.
I appreciate it, guys.
Have a good evening. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good one, mate.
Bye.
All right. Any other comments on that topic, or do we want to take it offline as Chris suggested and continue async and most likely put it on next week's agenda?
Just quickly, Nori, if it's all right. I think we can figure out more definitive ways of reporting on our works after. That doesn't need to be done before we can figure out funding. We just know that we need to have some defined roles. We already have some stuff in place. Like all we need to do is maybe refine it slightly, mostly on reporting and holding everyone accountable to the work that they're doing as a Circle representative. I don't think that needs to be finalized before we can agree on some form of reasonable funding for works. And I think that's actually going to hold up the process. And that's a problem, because we need to be able to tell people before they're going to start putting themselves forward, because everyone working for free is a non-starter. We'll have no one here. We'll end up having to do another 3 months because we're the only ones willing to do it, you know, and that's not good. That's not good for the community. Like, and this isn't coming from a selfish perspective. Like, I'm not getting paid. I'm not going for the next Circle. I'm not interested in me getting paid personally. I just want the people to follow me to actually be paid fair compensation for their work. I think that's really important, and it sets a standard that's really important as well. There are a lot of people working for free in the ecosystem, and it's not right, you know, and that goes for people running spaces. Like a lot of guys I know personally turn up every day and do spaces for nothing. And what happens when something comes up, when they get a job or some works come up, it'll all stop, and then the community falls apart. And that is a terrible, terrible thing that we're risking by not supporting the people who are representing these roles. And that has to change. And it's not just Catalyst Circle, obviously. Nori, JP, you should all be fairly compensated for your time as well, because you all put time in too. Felix and his other things that he does, again, should be fairly compensated. That's the discussion that got me in the Circle in the first place, was Felix saying he had to give up some of his pay to pay other people because there was no money for them. And that's just a terrible, terrible standard that we've accidentally fallen into because everyone's excited about working within the ecosystem, but it's not a sustainable way of conducting business. Sorry to rant, but I think it's important.
Very important. Yeah. Quasar and then Felix.
Not Quasar, everyone else, but not Quasar. He doesn't deserve to be paid yet.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't deserve anything.
Sorry, kid. I'm only kidding.
No, I understand. I'm concerned about the delay. Obviously, the conversation is a real deal. I would like to suggest that we do push forward with the community, the nominee criteria and form to move that along, and hopefully next week we'll have some clarity about the compensation. But moving it forward is still at the front of everyone's list, I hope.
Really good point. Felix and then Steve.
Maybe this is something what we can do as Cattle Circle said it already, to say, hey, let's align behind the fact that we are here to define, okay, how should Catalyst Circle work for the future? And that we know volunteerism is pretty exclusive. Just less of the people actually are able to participate on a voluntarily basis. So it's not an inclusive format at all to drive it by this. And we see the very different perspective. I think the best case is really the challenge team, where IHK has some really clear perspectives, imaginations, expectations from what it should be. And I never mentioned set up a Telegram channel, set up a Discord server, and communicate all the time with the funded proposals, right? It's never not in their scope. But the community comes with another perspective, like the DREPs, when it says, oh, okay, it's the first role where a community member can live from. And then we figure out, wait, this is $9,000 per year. Are you fucking kidding? What are you doing? And I think this is maybe not even something IHK doesn't give a shit about, but it's something they don't understand of the level of seriousness, how do you call it? Yeah, you know what I mean, as we do. Because we are the ones who experience it. It's not IHK, right? Like you said, for example, yeah. Especially not when they're on 120, 150K per year. So I think it's really just a mismatch of experience and perspective. Maybe just that we are able to communicate properly. What is the intent behind that? We need serious resources there. Because this is something IoT is not fully able to understand because they are not in our position. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
you know, and you know, the thing, you know, like with funded proposers, you know, like what they have to do to satisfy input output before they get their money. It's kind of all of a sudden it starts to feel like a corporation, and that's not what this is. That's not what anybody is. That's not what any of the funded proposers are. Right. And I think that we have to find a way for accountability to happen without these bean counter mechanisms. and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I just mean in terms of like, you know, like funded proposers who are doing what they said they were going to do, and then hearing, yeah, that's not enough. You know, we want more of an account of what you did. You know, and you know, this whole community is doing a lot of vague things, you know, that are working towards more substantial things, and there's got to be a better way to accept the work as proof of itself. And I'm sorry, I hear everybody, and I you know, we are a weird mix, you know, just to Felix's point, you know, it's sacrifice and service and money, you know, and how do you do that in a fair way, in a way that actually recognizes, you know, there's something very etheric about what we're trying to do, and it's not just a thing that you can just check off, like I cleaned the dressers and now I'm going to clean the kitchen counter. You know, it's not like that kind of work. See you, JP. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve. We are at the end of time, so I don't want to interrupt, but I also don't want to keep people over.
No, it's cool.
We should
I'm done.
do a quick checkout. If you, Quasar, how are you at the end of this meeting? Any final words?
Oh, I'm doing great. I love it. This was a great meeting. A lot of great things were discussed. We've got not a roadmap, but we've got some frameworks or guidelines to go by, and I think we're getting real close to making an announcement to introduce future CCv4.
Steve, final words?
I thought we were getting pretty good at knowing specifically what to do this next week. The money is like a fog that comes into my head when we start talking about that. But you know, like we'll just follow up with the engagement, and hit these town halls and work on the code of conduct. I think I don't have a good feeling about understanding what's happening about resolving the money issue. I'd like to know that that's actually going to get resolved. I don't want to go through this fog about the compensation for the next circle for the next 4 weeks. I don't want to hold the election, if as long as it's nebulous in that way. I want to be able to promote it. I want to know what to say to people. If I'm encouraging them to be nominees, like Greece, like I don't want to tell anybody to do it other than they should, but I don't, if there's nothing fixed, then why should they?
Thanks, Steve. We should definitely seek clarity on that over the next little while. Felix, final thoughts. How are you doing?
Really happy for the meeting and the time with you all. Because we went through almost everything now, only budget. Both have to be solved. So really happy and looking forward for next steps.
Awesome. And Reese, how are you doing at the end of the meeting?
Yeah, I'm really glad that we're getting to the end of it and actually getting things over the line. I'm a little frustrated that it's taken this long to actually have a discussion about compensation, because that I feel like it's been put off for a while for no good reason. And I just hope that we can resolve it as soon as possible, because that is going to stop the election happening. And right now that's a little frustrating after, we've all spent a lot of time trying to figure out all these documents, I feel like we could have been doing this in parallel and we'd be there by now. But, it's still a very positive meeting. I'm really happy where we're going. I just really hope we can figure this out sooner rather than later.
Thanks, Reese. Everyone else is gone, so I'll close up. I thought it was a really good meeting. I came in and I was a little burned out and tired, but I'm actually energized right now because I think it was super productive and a lot of things got decided and you are all amazing. So thank you for your participation. And yes, I think there's a lot of confusion around the compensation still. So I invite everyone to engage with your communities, engage async with Chris on the Slack channels and push it forward, not waiting till next Thursday. And just come in prepared to make a decision next Thursday, because I think it is key for the election too. So yeah, thank you all for your time today.
Thanks, Norman.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good week.
Thanks, guys. Have a good evening.
See you somewhere soon.
Okay.